Welcome back to Instagram versus Reality, episode 5. So this is a segment in the channel where we look through some of the millions of photos being put up on Instagram and try to identify what's edited and what isn't. Many of you have also asked for longer videos, so I'm trying to make them longer with each episode. So now here's a disclaimer, I'm not trying to single anyone out or to damage their brand. The video is simply meant to be informative. If you've been keeping up with the series, you should all be getting better by now at identifying the Liquify tool. It's often incorrectly referred to as Facetune, but that's a whole set of tools, whereas the Liquify is used to reshape your face only. So right off the bat, she's tucked the excess fat beneath her chin. This can be done in the Liquify tool, but it's much easier to just push up on the roof of your mouth with your tongue to raise your pharynx. Also, she's looking at the camera from an off-center high angle, which is very deliberately done to hide any excess on her neck and chin. Plus, it makes editing her jawline way easier as there's less soft shadows. Lastly, if you zoom in, you can see what we call image artifacts, which is a broad term for disturbed pixels. Here the skin is usually blurry, which is a telltale sign of Liquify tool use, because the tool blends pixels together when you move them, like a thick soup sort of. My verdict is that she definitely edited her jawline. As for the chin though, I think that's just more of an angle kind of thing going on. Alright, so I wasn't too sure what the deal with this photo was. For the most part, it's a decent Liquify job because she's standing in front of a plain background. In modeling, they use the Liquify tool all the time, especially commercial photos like your e-commerce store photos, which is why your clothes never fit the same. If your gut feeling is telling you that an image is edited, the best way to check is to simply zoom in. Again, going back to image artifacts, when we zoom in around the waist, you can see the clear distortion in pixels. It might be a bit hard to see if you're not watching the video in HD, but essentially there's color added into the shadows. Literally pixels of red, green and blue get added into the image because the computer doesn't know how else to fill it in when the pixel that was there originally gets moved. These are known as image artifacts because they don't exist in the original image and have been added in by the computer without the editor noticing. Compare this section of her leg, which I'd assume is unedited, to this one. The shadows are smoother and the jitter is a lot less in this section. Near the waist, and especially her hips, there's a huge amount of blur and a random white glow showing up, which is not really possible because there isn't any light behind her. The image could have been an almost perfect fake if the editor, well probably her, wasn't being lazy. Ideally, you'd want to smooth the image after a Liquify job with a dodge or burn tool, or even just even out the pixel color with a very light Gaussian blur, and you can also just slap on a filter to make the pixel distortion less noticeable. While you're scrolling Instagram, you're probably not going to be able to zoom in like I do and see the pixels in detail, but random white lines and glows like this are a telltale sign because the Liquify tool also bends how light hits the body, especially when she's wearing all black like here. This photo here took me so long to figure out what was wrong. I kept zooming into the giraffe thinking there's no way she face-tuned the giraffe. Turns out it's just a case of bending space and time, so don't do that. So sometimes I see edits and I just wonder why? So this guy here is smoothened his face so much that it makes his hairline look like a 2008 IMVU character on its own. And as far as skin retouches go, this is really badly done because of how it blurs the fade on his hair, on the side of his head. Now I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that he's probably used some kind of a blur, like a Gaussian blur, which is fine when it's done in moderation. The problem is that this blur removes skin texture, which on a guy just looks really strange because we generally have more porous skin. The better way of doing this would be to use what's known as frequency separation retouching. This method preserves texture by splitting an image into its red, green, and blue components, and then you subtract the differences between them, leaving behind just the skin texture, which then on can just be smoothed more naturally and more controlled. Alright, now here's the interesting part. Photo manipulation has been around for a very long time. From the late 1800s, artists have been using the very same principles I'm teaching you here on the channel to edit their works. They'd have the subject stand in front of a black panel and carefully etch into the negatives to paint their photos in the way that would sell best. A lot of early photo manipulation involved changing body shapes to match beauty standards, and rarely ever actually worked on the face. Like in this impossibly thin waist here, you can very clearly see the image artifacts I've been talking about throughout the video. Photoshop has made it easier and less noticeable, but moving pixels causes distortion because it's adding new information that wasn't originally there. It's making the computer think for itself, and well, the machine never gets it right 100% of the time. Here's a more modern day example of Edwardian retouching. The left is unedited and the right is edited. Notice how subtle the editing is. Nowadays we go way overboard with photo manipulation, and it's why I have content for my channel. In the past, photo retouching was so subtle that the majority of the population didn't even know it was possible. Now, on Instagram vs Reality, episode 3, some of you commented that it isn't possible to face-tune videos in real time. The technology that allows it has actually been around since 2004. This camera here, the size of your palm, has enough computational power to reshape your face even when you look away. Snapchat can do something similar, but not to this standard because your phones can't compete with the power needed. This is professional grade gear made for live streamers. Think of your Twitch and YouTube beauty gurus. It's a lot more prevalent than you think, and it's just that for the most part, the people who can afford and understand this kind of technology can hide it very well, whereas photo retouching is super accessible to people with zero experience thanks to apps like Facetune. Here's an app that smoothens your complexion in real time. The problem with these apps, however, is that since they're on your phone, they excessively smoothen your face, because rendering texture and pores for a natural look, like they do in the movies, uses more power than your phone could ever provide. Now take a look at this example. Pay attention to the lips. The appeal is pretty clear. You get the perfect airbrush look without the heaviness of wearing makeup on end. There's a few beauty gurus on YouTube who I've seen abuse this, but my lips are shut, like hers. And so that's the end of episode 5. If you guys like this type of content, please do subscribe, it really helps me out. And I'll also want to shout out my Instagram, because if you guys want to follow me, it's kind of cool. That'd be nice. Thank you.